Before we dive into writing our application, we need to first of all go over the tools that you will need for this course. Now, because we are using ASP.NET, it goes without saying that we are going to use tools from Microsoft. And when you talk about ASP.NET web pages, there are essentially two options. One is Web Matrix, the other is Visual Studio. However, today there's really only one option, and that is Visual Studio, because Microsoft hasn't really updated Web Matrix in quite some time. And I have a feeling that some of that is due to how Microsoft started to roll out updates to ASP.NET. The ASP.NET team has done a very good job decoupling ASP.NET from Visual Studio. And unfortunately, Microsoft hasn't made those same changes to Web Matrix. Now, right now, Web Matrix is in limbo as far as I know. I don't know if they are going to continue to support it or if they are going to just get rid of that software altogether. I really hope that they don't because it is a nice tool. But for this course, we're going to use Visual Studio, and you can use the Express Edition or you can use the full-blown version. If you go to visualstudio.com, click on Downloads, and if you want to use the Express Edition, this is free, you will want the Visual Studio Express 2013 for web. And the year really doesn't matter. If you are watching these videos and Visual Studio 2015 or whatever is out, then you will want to use that version. There are two options. You can download the ISO and install it from the ISO, or you can use the web installer. I highly recommend that you use the web installer. Every time that I have tried to use the ISO, I have always run into issues. I don't know if something gets corrupted whenever I'm downloading the ISO, it just doesn't work all of the time. But the web installer practically works every time. Now, if you have a paid-for version of Visual Studio, then you're already set. You don't have to worry about that. And the installation is painless. Whenever you install Visual Studio, it's kind of get it started and go and get a cup of coffee or whatever you want to drink, because it'll take a few minutes, but it is a straightforward process. The second thing that you'll need is a database server. Because we are going to be building a content management system, you need something to store that data. So we have several options that we could use as a database server, because with ASP.NET you can connect to virtually any database server. But I imagine most of the time you will be using Microsoft's SQL Server. Well, they also have an Express edition of SQL Server. It is perfectly and totally fine to use it, and the best part is that it's free. So if you do a search for SQL Server Express, let's see where this takes us. And this first item, SQL Server Express Editions, looks promising. So we will go to here and let's see what we have. Evaluate, compare technical details, blah, 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 blah. And now we have, unfortunately, quite a few options. And I say unfortunately because if you're not aware as to what exactly you need, you don't really know what it is that you need to download and install. Now there's this local DB, which is automatically installed whenever you install Visual Studio. This is a trimmed down version of SQL Server Express. And as you can see from the description, it is a lightweight version of Express that has its programmability features, yet runs in user mode and has a fast zero configuration installation. That's all well and good, and you can manage it through Visual Studio, but I personally do not like that. I'd like to use Microsoft's SQL Server Management Studio, and you can see that right here. Now, if you download SQL Server Management Studio, you're just getting the Management Studio. You're not getting the SQL database engine either. So instead, you want to do this SQL Server Express with tools. This will give you the SQL Server database as well as the tools for managing that SQL Server. So let's download this. And even though that this says that this is an evaluation, this really isn't an evaluation. This is software that you can run on your computer or on your server if you wanted to, and there is no expiration. So let's scroll on down. Let's get started now, or let's see what other options we have. We don't have any. So we will get started now. And Microsoft does want you to register this software. So you do have to have a Microsoft account and you do have to log in. And I will do that off screen. After you log in, you go to this Profile Center page, which really isn't a profile at all. It does have your name and email address, but this is where you choose what version of SQL Server Express that you want to install. And we want this Express with tools. So if you check that and then continue, you will then go to another page where you have to input some other information, and then at the bottom, click Continue. And then on the next page, we finally get to choose what we want to download, the 32-bit or the 64-bit. I'm on a 64-bit installation of Windows, so I will check that, continue, and I want English. So continue once again. And it looks like Microsoft wants us to install this download manager, but we don't have to if you don't want to. If you want to, feel free to do so. But if you scroll down, you can see that if you cannot complete the installation, click here. You can click there and then click OK. And then over here on the right side of the screen is a link to the exe that you need. So just click that, and then the download will start. Whenever you run the exe, it's going to unpack everything into whatever folder that you specify. I just chose the default, which is inside of my downloads folder. And inside of this unpacked folder, you want to run setup.exe. And that will take you to this SQL Server Installation Center. Now, the first item is what you want, a new SQL Server standalone installation. Even if you already have SQL Server installed, this is what you will want to use so that you can add more features to it. So if SQL Server Express was installed whenever you installed Visual Studio, you will want this first option because that is how you install the Management Studio. If you are upgrading from a previous version of SQL Server, then you will want to take this second option. But let's click on this first option. And unfortunately, installing SQL Server is not as straightforward as installing Visual Studio. There are many steps involved. It has to go through some verification processes, and it has to run these verification processes quite often. So you basically just want to click Next until you get to this screen. This is where you choose what features you want installed with this SQL Server installation. We basically want everything here. We don't really need the SQL Server replication, so I'm just going to uncheck that. But one of the big things that you want to make sure is checked is the management tools. This is going to install Management Studio, and that is how you manage SQL Server. So with everything checked except for SQL Server replication, if you want replication, check it. It's fine if you do. Just click on Next. This is going to go through another verification process, and then I believe we get to choose what we want to call our installation. Yes, SQL Express is standard, so let's just click on Next. And then you will want to take the defaults on this next screen, so click Next. And then we get to choose how we want to log into SQL Server. I always go for mixed mode, because Windows authentication is very nice, but sometimes you also need to provide a username and a password. So mixed mode gives you the best of both worlds. You can log in using Windows authentication or with a SQL authentication. So this is going to create an SA user. And for the password, I'm just going to do password. So password, and then click on Next. Except that, no, you can't. That does not meet the complexity requirements. So instead, let's do password with a capital P, and let's see if that passes muster. So click on Next. No, it doesn't. Okay, so let's add some more complexity. Let's do capital PASSWZORD. Let's try that once again. Hopefully that will work. It does. And then we finally start installing SQL Server. And once you have SQL Server installed, you should see a success status for each of these items. And you can click close. You might have to reboot your computer. It really depends upon your computer and the installation. But once it's done, you have everything that you need for this course, or at least everything that we need to install. We still need some things, but we will get those inside of Visual Studio.